Broadcasting live from Studio One high atop the WVOX Tower. This is Westchester's only locally owned and operated community station for you and yours for more than 50 years. 1460 WVOX.
WVOX.
Welcome to Slow Medicine Radio. Our host is integrative medicine Dr. Michael Finkelstein. Michael offers medical advice from a holistic paradigm, including both medical and metaphysical philosophies from the full spectrum of human experience. Slow Medicine Radio offers fresh ideas on how to attain a state of wellness that seems distant given the limitations of today's medical paradigm. It introduces you to thought leaders who connect the dots between theory and practice, examining health from a broad perspective with regards to medical diagnoses, conventional and alternative therapies, healthcare policy, and related topics that warrant further thought and discussion. Slow Medicine Radio does not prescribe to take this or do that. Instead, it offers an open-minded, intelligent, and practical approach to living, resulting in greater health individually and collectively. Here is Dr. Michael Finkelstein, the founder of Sunraven, the home of slow medicine in Bedford, New York.
Well, welcome to Slow Medicine Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Finkelstein, and we're here every Monday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time on 1460 AM or worldwide at WVOX.com. And the purpose of this show really is to provide you with some alternative thinking on the subject of health and harmony, and for today, your relationships. Today happens to be Labor Day. Many of us, at least, are conscientiously either taking the day off or respecting those who work or how we work. And this is the day that we honor and are grateful for the opportunities that we have and all the work that's done around us. But when we think about why we work as hard as we do, often it's because we want to be able to come home to a life with a group of other people, whether it's our families or our friends, our communities, and share our lives and the good part of living with all of those others. And it takes work to do that. So on this day off, I invited my wife, Robin Queen Finkelstein, who's truly an expert on human relationships and psycho-spiritual thinking and living, to help me share with you thoughts about how the quality of your relationships can be considered in maybe a fresh light, so that what you see going forward is more and more peace and harmony in your home, and tie it all together with your life and work and life's purpose. So, Robin Queen Finkelstein,
thank you for having me.
Welcome to Slow Medicine Radio.
Glad to be here.
So, when we think about relationships, you and I have had many conversations about it, and we work together at Sunraven, where people come to us, join us in programs, men's groups, women's groups, couples programs. We have a family garden program. As you know, people often are looking for connection. Part of the reason that people suffer, part of what's on their mind when they go to sleep and have difficulty falling asleep, maybe is what ails them in their body, but quite often it has something to do with their relationships.
That's true. We are definitely interactive human beings that need connection, true connection with each other.
So when you see people who come to you, what do you think is bringing them? Are they aware of their feeling disconnected, or do they have another symptom or concern that they share with you first?
Well, I think the most profound challenge for people is that they do not feel heard and listened to.
So how does that manifest?
The most common relationship complaints would be that one would be aware in some way that their needs aren't getting met, and perhaps they're not even quite aware of that issue. However, it's very important that one knows that there is a need behind, that we each have an individual expression of ourselves, and when we're in relationship, unless we're aware of communicating within ourselves, it's very difficult for people to relate to each other.
How does what we're experiencing today reflect on what we have had, in our lives growing up? Do you find that most people who have situations now that are challenging for them reflect something that happened previously in their lives?
Yes, it starts early on. Our parents, our environment, our caretakers are absolutely influential on our communication skills. Basically, when we're very little, if parents or caretakers don't have the ability to witness a human being and be able to reflect to them, be able to pause and listen to the way they are expressing themselves, unfortunately, early on, we get the message that we need to conform to somebody else's idea or thoughts. So the process that I think is most important is to be able to reflect a person when a child is young, to be able to allow them the dignity to express themselves, and that it's not judged or have a personal expectation placed on the child. It starts very, very young. So when we have our full adult selves, it's really challenging sometimes for us to be able to express ourselves fully and authentically without someone else's ideas or opinions to interject our expression.
So what I'm hearing you say is that as a result of how we're raised, when people cut us off or they layer over us expectations about what they think we should be living up to, we learn at an early age to adjust, maybe become self-conscious. It interferes with our full natural expression, and eventually that looks sort of our natural way, but yet it might have been shaped a lot by our early life. When we get older then, and you mentioned that when we're parents then, and we start thinking about how we're going to relate to our own children, then you're saying, as a parent, be mindful of that, how you're shaping your child. But what I want to ask you about first, before we get to raising children, is getting back to the adult person who's likely to be listening to us right now. So most people in your experience have been shaped in some way, that there's a voice in their head that's telling them that what they're doing is good or not good enough, or they might be better off doing something else. And that voice is constantly ongoing, giving us messages and in a way confusing us, getting us a little bit offline, self-conscious, feeling uncomfortable in some way. So people come in with issues, and then now they're having other relationships with other adults who have similar patterns. When two people interact, they're in a friendship, or they're a couple, or it's a mother and an adult child, meaning people who are listening and their older parents. So it gets twisted and complicated. So we at Sunraven, though, you have really led us to consider 3 operative principles that relate to this, to reclaim the balance and the harmony in our relationships. And it begins with what?
First step is skill, rather. We'll call it a skill, is a request to ask, first of all, if someone is available to hear. And because many times we're in the middle, we're tending to many other things and multitasking. So the most important thing is to first know that the process would be a reflection within yourself, to be clear about what it is you'd like to share with someone. In our environment in Sunraven, in our home, in our relationship, it really is about learning how to take a pause and being able to express yourself through reflecting process of listening to someone, if we're listening to somebody else, and then honoring their experience, their expression, and also, okay, you can.
So the word that we use, the first principle in this relationship with other people, when we are raised with this tendency to feel like we're always being listened to and evaluated and judged, and we have a partner who does the same thing.
Correct.
What's the first word principle that we use in incorporating relationships?
Reflection of seeing another person.
So when somebody says, I'm not feeling well today, the first thing you say is, not too bad you don't feel well, but I hear you saying.
Absolutely. Yeah, to reflect back what you heard the person saying. That's the most important key.
Okay. And after that, So how does that help a person who has been raised, with judges in their life feel differently?
Well, for some, it's brand new. What it helps is to identify what that person might need to express or feel safe, or want to be able to share what is really going on, opposed to what someone else's expectation of them is placed on them, perhaps, or judgment. It avoids those very negative aspects of communication. People tend to shut down. They don't feel comfortable. So that first step of honoring is to really reflect, and just the practice of really understanding, to listen to a person and hear what they're saying and reflect that back to them.
So key in all of this is actually listening well to somebody.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's really a lost skill, or perhaps for some of us, we just never received that. So it could be foreign. So it really, I would say, we were talking earlier, it's a skill. To be able to be intimate with other human beings is really the ability to be able to listen and really reflect back what you hear them saying.
Without judgment. So that's the difference. So
yeah.
The parent who's unskillful raises a child and responds and evaluates and judges what's being done, as opposed to eliciting feelings and acknowledging those feelings before trying to qualify them or change them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So in adult relationships, that's so critical, that people enter conversations before trying to respond to what they heard, is to just simply acknowledge and hear what's being expressed.
That's right.
And maybe even trying to get to secondary layers. So, first somebody might share a feeling, but I know when you're talking with people, you're often asking, is there more about that? You're asking secondary questions. Tell me more about that feeling. Not just tell me I feel sad, but tell me a little bit more about that. I feel angry. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Can you be curious? I think curiosity would replace judgment. If you took judgment out and you were curious, really curious about what's going on for that person, you would have, the other person is going to feel that you have an interest in them and they're being heard and seen. And it doesn't mean you don't have your own time to express yourself. It's just, it merges when we don't take a pause and take a moment just to reflect. And the second part is honoring, validating the person, which is important.
So we'll talk about that. I just wanted to finish up, though, with the first component, which is the slowing down so that you fully hear what's being said.
Correct, yes.
That and slow medicine really is about being able to go at a rhythm that's a little different than the fast, frenetic pace that's typical. Mm-hmm. And in that, then allow for the emergence of more deep feeling and more deep sharing. And that actually breeds tremendous intimacy.
It sure does.
Anyway, I think this is a good time for us to take a pause. We'll come back to continue this conversation with Robin Queen Finkelstein on the subject of relationships and a good type of work. Stay with us.
You're listening to Slow Medicine Radio. You can find out more about the show and the work of Dr. Michael Finkelstein by visiting his website, slowmedicinedoctor.com. Slow Medicine Radio is sponsored by the Slow Medicine Foundation, dedicated to providing community-centered experiential and reflective learning for individuals, families, and groups, offering educational programs, events, and resources, as well as insightful health evaluations with customized medical guidance. Dr. Finkelstein works with his wife, Robin Queen Finkelstein, at their farm, Sunraven, in Bedford, New York. And they invite you to visit and take advantage of this unique resource, including men's and women's groups and couples programs. If you think about it, much of what we experience when we don't feel well is a result of the fast world and how it affects us. Therefore, if fast is the disease, then slow is the medicine. Visit Sunraven, the home of slow medicine in Bedford, New York. Go to slowmedicinedoctor.com or call 914-218-3113. And thank you for tuning in Mondays at 5 p.m. right here on 1460 WVOX.
Well, welcome back to Slow Medicine Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Finkelstein. Finkelstein. I'm here with my wife, Robin Queen Finkelstein, who's a psychospiritual counselor. We call her the slow medicine therapist. Therapy is really not the ideal word for what she does, which is to bring people into a place of great security where they could feel, as we've been talking about, more fully about what's going on in their inner world, and without judging it or without coming up with some opinion as far as is it good or not good. Is just to be with what is, and then consider how one might accept more fully what is, and then move into a greater state of harmony, especially when it comes to the working relationships that we have with others, which often brings a lot of people to your practices. Is that right?
This is true, yes.
So we were talking about principles, and we have been talking about respect and reflecting on what other people say and how they're expressing themselves without judgment as the first part of a working relationship. It's really the intimacy of good listening, of really being curious, of accepting how people are and how they feel as the first part. Because without that, we violate trust. We sort of step on people in terms of our opinions and our attitudes before often they actually finish what they're saying. And we remind them, perhaps, of that feeling of what it was like to be young. And then the patterns of behavior just follow what used to be the case when we were young. In fact, you often talk about how even as adults we still walk around with our little child within us who's readily available when triggered. So after that, though, so let's say in a working relationship, just to give people a little bit of a sense of how you proceed. So after that initial phase, what's in couples in particular, how do you usually take them to the next step? There are 3 words that you use to talk about a wholesome, healthy relationship. What are those?
Right. Well, as you shared, the reflection, which is really the process of listening and mirroring your partner or your loved one or your child. Secondly is the validation, which is honoring their personal experience for their own and being able to pause and have, as you could imagine, you being in your partner or the other person's body and relating to that through really just holding the space for them and imagining what they are experiencing without having to agree or disagree, which is the huge disconnector for couples. Number 3 is empathy. Being able to truly have compassion for what, and that would be love, which is love is unconditional. And that would be empathy, that you can imagine what your other partner may be experiencing in the moment and having compassion for them.
Yeah. So in those 3 elements, we're constantly reminding ourselves, and in a couple situation, there's a committed partnership. There's a committed agreement to working with each other. You know, when people say their vows, they often talk about through thick and thin, you know, through good times and bad times. And relationships require work. It's not that there's a lot of bad times necessarily, because again, as you advise, I don't want to use those qualifying words, good, bad, all the time. But there are times where there are challenges, where things come up. And so the idea then is to stay in the boat, and is to do that with these 3 dimensions of a working relationship, which is really to reflect and to really hear what's being expressed, is to appreciate, you know, validate, but to really honor the unique nature of that individual, the unique person that is your partner. And then after that is really to love people unconditionally, is to really accept what is with an agreement toward mutual healing.
Absolutely. That's key.
Yeah. What are the relationships that do you see commonly?
Well, I would say with a parent-child relationship, a mother and a child, obviously we all want our children to be safe, secure, which brings me to a really great point, is about not just being safe, having your child be and feel secure in your presence is the most important thing. And back to the process of mirror reflecting and honoring and loving, it's really the ability to allow your child to feel secure in your presence, that they can express what is really going on if they're struggling. Most young people feel afraid, perhaps back to the judgment or expectations that are placed on them. So I'm working with families, and specifically mom and their children, and it's amazing when they just sit and they have a tool to be able to really infuse in the relationship. The parent feels amazing, the child feels heard for sometimes the first time, where they can express themselves freely.
Sometimes when I'm watching you work and I'm seeing people come in and then I see them leave an hour or two later, I see a real difference in terms of the closeness, the physical closeness of the child and the parent. Mm-hmm. Obviously this is something that, well, you wouldn't say it's a quick fix, because slow medicine in general implies that things take time to really deeply heal and move in a direction. But the work itself can have pretty rapid results in terms of closeness. Mm-hmm. And the more times that we can reproduce that, eventually that's how those seeds are planted, where the garden flourishes. It's interesting to me that when I've actually seen you do that work, and you talked about children who feel not secure. One of the things, these principles, is we can all, I think, imagine if we were 5 years old, and if we had, if we're frightened because we're hurting inside physically, let's say, or somebody has just taken something from us, or we have competition with a sibling. You can all imagine that if we were in that little person's shoes, we might have very similar reactions. And so the key for a parent, as I've heard you say then, is to empathize. Just be in that position. Of course you would react quite similarly. So the judgment, the blame, the lecturing, and the criticism is unnecessary. One
That's
can
right.
simply say, it must feel bad that your brother took your toy.
Right.
And that would go a really long way in de-escalating a situation that is so common in households.
Absolutely. And leaving out the fixing component. That if you just took, I'm not going to fix this, I'm just going to listen. Mm-hmm. I'm going to allow this other person to have their full dignity of what they're trying to say to us, it really, really helps. Mm-hmm. I think that we feel as parents and even adults that we need to fix someone else. And we want to, actually from our heart, our intentions are good, that we want to help. And in turn, we actually end up disconnecting because we're infusing and not allowing the person their own dignity to find their own way.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, which is to get out of the fix mindset.
That's right.
Things actually do respond very well, meaning they will come into better alignment and can, from that point of view, be fixed, but without it being a solution that's being sort of applied directly. It's more like cultivating the environment, and it's restoring security and connection, as we started to talk, that really is the antidote when it comes to relationships.
That's right.
Because it's the disconnect experience that usually leads people to feel unwell.
And responding opposed to reacting or reactivity. Obviously, they have two different meanings.
Yeah.
Reactivity is, I have to do something about this, or that person is not correct, or not. A lot of times it's hidden agendas that our needs, the fear underneath is that we're not going to get what we need. So for children, a lot of times they don't really know what they need. So using this process of reflecting, honoring, and loving and pausing in between allows your child to come to their own aha.
That's great. So, well, we're almost out of time. So maybe in the minute or two that we have remaining, maybe share with the audience here what we do at Sunraven, what's coming up. I know we have the cafe this Sunday, September 11th, at 10 o'clock, 10 to 12. It's really something that we do to invite people to our property to just walk through the garden. We make some great wholesome food. What do you find when people come to that? What's the environment like?
Well, it's something that I dreamed about when I was younger, coming from a family who also struggled with communication. that it's just peaceful and people feel at ease, and there's nature and just a very open feeling, and there is no judgments, there are no expectations. It's a beautiful a way that we can express what we do and share our hearts with our community.
So, and how can people find out more about your work?
Well, they could come, they could visit, I have a website, and or on your website, which is Slow Medicine. I am the slowmedicinetherapist.com. So you could check out the website and look on our calendar. I also hold weekly women's groups twice a week, which is another supportive environment of helping each other feel heard and listened to. And so that's twice a week. And yeah, check us out on the website.
Well, I really appreciate you joining me.
Thank you
now
for
I get to
having
have
me.
dinner with you.
Yes,
Which
thank
is
you.
really quite lovely. And so you've been listening to Slow Medicine Radio. We're here every Monday at 5 o'clock. And next week I'm going to be here with you, meaning if you'd like to call in, that's going to be next week's show. And if you want to actually email me a question ahead of time, you can do that, michael@slowmedicinedoctor.com. And until then, this last remnant of Labor Day weekend, please enjoy your home labor. And I hope that some of the things that Robin and I shared with you today will make a difference. And we'll see you next week.